was going to be my review for Dunkirk from 2017. I just saw this movie yesterday from when I'm recording this. It just came out the weekend before, so brand new release. I was really interested in seeing this as a new Christopher Nolan movie, and just looking at his filmography. I've seen all of his movies now that I've seen this, which is kind of rare. I think maybe I've only seen all of Quentin Tarantino's movies and like David Lynch or something like that. So this is actually written and directed by Christopher Nolan. One of his few sole writing credits. He also wrote his very first movie, Following, which was like a student film, and then I believe Interstellar. He wrote that by himself. Usually his brother, Jonathan Nolan, helps him or has a part in the writing. This is written by him. So this is actually a historical war movie. If you don't know, I don't know how many people are familiar with the Dunkirk, but this movie is very, I'd say, minimalist. So kind of just some of the background. And they say it at the very beginning of the movie. There's like flyers that are dropped on the soldiers, as well as some title cards that are shown. But so there's a bunch of British, French, and like Belgian soldiers in France that have been fighting against the Germans, and they're all have been backed up and they're surrounded into just one part of France. They're completely surrounded and they're about to just be destroyed by the German forces. And so the whole idea and concept and what happened is that the British need to cross the English Channel and get all of their soldiers off of out of France to, keep their army alive. And I think in the movie they say there's like 400,000 soldiers on the beach. So yeah, that's the basic story. Not a ton of the left of the plot really. It just follows a couple different soldiers. And actually, I guess I should re-say that there's actually 3 different parts of the movie. So there's one section that is, it says it's a week long on the beach, and this follows all the different soldiers. There's a couple soldiers in there, maybe 5 that we see. It's what they're doing, how they're trying to survive on the beach, how they're trying to get off of the beach and get into the boats. That's the big thing. There's very few boats left. They can't come into the beach because they'll get hit by the German artillery, and so they're trying to figure out ways to get them off this beach. The next part is, it says it's a day long, and it shows civilians. And so what the British did from whatever point of Britain is closest to France, to Dunkirk, they have all of the civilian ships that they can find take off from port and go over to Dunkirk to pick people up. And so this next segment says it's a day long, and it shows a civilian and his son, and then another younger boy that works on the boat, I guess. And this guy is played by Mark Rylance. He's one of the... There's not a lot of well-known actors in this, but he's one of the few. So Mark Rylance is captaining the boat. And then there's the third segment. It's actually only an hour long, and this is the point of view of a couple fighter pilots. So there's 3 of them. Tom Hardy plays the main pilot that we're concerned with. There's actually, I should say that Tom Hardy is Farrier, and then another guy named Collins. We see them the most. And so there are 3 pilots, British pilots. They're flying Spitfires, and they're going across the channel to try to help the boats get across and stop their attacks from the German Air Force. And so it's pretty interesting. They're kind of cut in it's not as crazy as Nolan's movies usually are. He does a lot of crazy time stuff with like Memento and some of his other movies. Here it's not super confusing or anything, because when you're seeing the people on the boat, it's like a day. When you're seeing the pilots, they're working within an hour time frame, and then the rest of the soldiers, they go through multiple kind of situations and bombardments and whatnot, because it's a week. So, like I said before, it's a pretty minimal movie. There's very, very little dialogue. A couple of other actors that we'd recognize other than Tom Hardy and Mark Rylance. Kenneth Branagh is like the I think he's an admiral, and he's on the beach. He's on Dunkirk trying to get all of the people over, trying to figure out, um, the best way to. They need like 30,000 to come back over to Britain, and he's concerned, of course, of getting more than that. He wants to get everybody off the island. It's not an island, off of France. So Count Brana is in there, and then one of the more interesting and unexpected casting choices, probably Harry Styles, formerly of One Direction, is one of the soldiers on the beach, and I probably wouldn't have recognized him, except I had heard before seeing the movie that he was in it, and so I knew it was him. But my friend that was with me, he asked, "Is that Harry Styles?" When he saw him, I was like, "Yeah." So I guess he's pretty recognizable. He does a good job. I was kind of surprised. I think this is probably definitely his first major acting gig. Does a good job. Oh, and then Cillian Murphy also shows up, and he's a soldier. He gets picked up by the boat that's being driven by Mark Rylance like early, and he has kind of like shell shocked, and he's really good too. Cillian Murphy's always good. So, other than that, it's really good. Haven't seen a World War II movie in a long time. It's interesting. It's very I don't know. The whole movie's kind of riding on this wave of like tension, and you definitely couldn't talk about this movie without talking about the score. Once again, Hans Zimmer is working with Christopher Nolan. They've teamed up on a ton of their movies together. Hans Zimmer is probably one of the more well-known composers now for music or movie scores. Does a great job. It really shows the tension building, especially when all these soldiers are being attacked by the Germans, and there's a lot of like situations where they're just dive bombing them and dropping bombs on the beach or attacking the ships, and the music does a great job of portraying the feelings and the emotions kind of that are going through everybody, because there is very little dialogue, and people communicate a lot without talking very effectively, I should say. There's always kind of a ticking clock, like literally in the scores. A clock is counting down for a lot of this, and kind of it ratchets up the tension of what's happening to them. So one thing that was probably a little, not annoying but unfortunate, is that the accents are pretty thick. They're from all over Great Britain, and some of their accents are so thick that it's hard to understand. Me and my friend both said that to each other after the movie. Like, man, I don't usually have a problem like hearing people's accents, but usually you can watch a movie long enough that you start to understand it. Just like in real life too, if anybody has an accent, the more you hear them, the more easy it is to understand what they're saying. But here they talk so little, there's so little dialogue. It's hard to kind of cut through their accents, which is unfortunate. I mean, they're speaking English, it's just very heavy British accents, or maybe even Scottish, or I think some of them call each other Highlanders and stuff like that. So that was like unfortunate a little bit. Like I kind of missed what they're saying, but oh well. Also, just aside from the score, like the sound is just incredible of like how it must have sounded for some of them to be attacked when they're in the ships, when they're on the beach. So yeah, it's like a definite big aspect of this movie is the score. It works really well. The acting's really good. I really like Tom Hardy's part. I'm kind of partial to planes and jets and stuff, so I really like seeing that stuff. It would have been cool to just see Christopher Nolan maybe do a whole movie on the aviators and the flying part of it, but that was good. Really interesting. I think it's a really crucial aspect of World War II. If they didn't get all these soldiers, or as many of them as they could, off of France, it could have really turned the tide of the war into Germany's favor. So I think it's an important part of history to kind of cover, and I think Nolan does a good job, good acting. I don't think it's not as good as something like Saving Private Ryan. It's a lot shorter. It's only 145 minutes. His shortest movie by far. but it's a very visceral kind of movie. So yeah, I liked it. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of a 5. So pretty high recommendation for Dunkirk. All right, that'll be it.